The mining world of Seven was a place where hope came to die. The sky was always gray, filled with dust and smoke from the deep mines that cut into the planet like open wounds. The air smelled of metal and sweat and something worse that no one wanted to name. This was a prison world, owned and operated by the Dominion, and the creatures who worked here were not workers. They were slaves. Jake had been on Seven for 3 years. 3 years of digging rocks from the ground. 3 years of eating food that tasted like cardboard. 3 years of watching people die from exhaustion, from beatings, from simply giving up. He had counted the days at first, scratching marks into the wall of his cell. Then he stopped counting. It hurt too much to know how long he had been away from Earth. He was 32 years old, though he looked older now. The mines aged a person fast. His brown hair had started to show gray at the edges. His hands were rough and from the work. But his eyes were still sharp, still alive, still watching everything around him. That was how he had survived this long. He watched. He learned. He helped when he could. Before they captured him, Jake had been a combat medic. He had served on ships that traveled between the stars, treating wounds and saving lives during the small wars that humans fought on the edges of known space. He was good at his job. He knew how to stop bleeding, how to set broken bones, how to keep someone alive when everything said they should be dead. They did not care about his skills at first. They put him in the mines like everyone else. But word spread among the prisoners. The human could heal. The human could help. Soon Jake was spending his nights treating the injured and the sick, using whatever supplies he could steal or trade for. The guards did not stop him. Healthy slaves worked harder, and that was all that mattered to them. There were terrible creatures to look at. They stood 7 feet tall on average, with thick scales that ranged from dark green to black. Their faces were flat and reptilian, with yellow eyes that showed no warmth, no mercy, no feeling at all. They had built an empire across dozens of star systems, and they had done it through violence and fear. Other species called them monsters. They called themselves conquerors. The commander of the 7 mining operation was unnamed. He was larger than most of his kind, with a long scar running down the left side of his face where someone had once tried to kill him. That someone had failed and had made an example of them that people still talked about in whispers. He ruled the prison with an iron claw, and he enjoyed his work far too much. Jake had learned to stay away from. He kept his head down. He did his work. He helped who he could. And every night he dreamed of Earth, of blue skies and green grass and air that did not taste like poison. Then came the storm. It started without warning, the way storms on Seven always did. The wind picked up, throwing dust and small rocks through the air. The sky turned from gray to black. Lightning crackled across the clouds, and thunder shook the ground beneath their feet. The guards shouted for the prisoners to get inside, and everyone ran for the shelter of the barracks. Jake was almost at the door when he saw it, a light in the sky falling fast. At first he thought it was a piece of debris, maybe a satellite knocked loose by the storm. But then he heard the sound, a high-pitched scream of engines pushed beyond their limits. It was a ship. The ship hit the ground half a mile from the mining compound. The impact shook the earth and sent a column of fire into the stormy sky. Jake stood frozen, watching, as pieces of the ship scattered across the rocky ground. The guards reacted quickly. Himself led a squad of soldiers toward the crash site, their weapons drawn and ready. Jake was pushed back into the barracks with the other prisoners, but he found a crack in the wall where he could watch what was happening. He saw them pull someone from the wreckage. She was tall, taller than any human woman Jake had ever seen. Her skin seemed to glow with a soft, pale light, even in the darkness of the storm. Her hair was long and silver, flowing behind her like water. She wore clothes that looked like they were made from starlight itself, though now those clothes were torn and stained with blood. Her blood was silver too, Jake noticed. Not red like a human, silver like liquid metal. She was beautiful in a way that did not seem real, and she was hurt. The soldiers surrounded her, pointing their weapons at her face. She tried to stand, but her legs gave out beneath her. Jake could see the pain in her expression, the way she held her side where her ribs must have been broken. Behind her, in the burning wreckage of the ship, he could see other bodies. Guards, maybe, protectors. They were all dead. Pushed through his soldiers and stood over the fallen woman. Even from this distance, Jake could see the cruel smile spreading across the commander's face. "Do you know who this is?" said, his voice carrying across the compound. He was speaking to his soldiers, but he wanted everyone to hear. "This is Princess of the Sovereignty, daughter of Queen herself." A murmur ran through the soldiers. Jake did not know much about galactic politics, but he knew the name. Everyone did. They were one of the oldest and most powerful species in the known galaxy. They lived for thousands of years. Their technology was centuries ahead of anyone else, and their queen was said to be the most powerful being alive. They feared no one, but they feared the queen's daughter, continued, his voice thick with pleasure. "Alone, unprotected, on my world." He reached down and grabbed the princess by her silver hair, pulling her head back so she was forced to look at him. "This is a gift from the universe itself." The princess did not cry out. She did not beg. She stared at with eyes that looked like captured stars, and there was no fear in them, only cold, quiet hatred. "My mother will come for me," she said. Her voice was steady despite her injuries. "And when she does, she will burn this world to ash." Laughed. It was a harsh, grinding sound, like rocks being crushed together. "Your mother does not know where you are, little princess. You were traveling in secret, were you not? No escort, no fleet, just you and a handful of guards who are now very dead." He released her hair and let her fall back to the ground. "By the time anyone finds you, you will be broken, and I will send the pieces back to your mother as a message." He turned to his soldiers. "Take her to the cells, and prepare the punishment square for tomorrow. The whole compound will watch as I teach this princess what it means to fall into hands." They dragged her away, her silver blood leaving a trail on the dusty ground. Jake watched until she disappeared from sight. His hands were shaking, though he did not know why. He had seen cruelty before. He had seen innocent people hurt and killed for no reason. This was just another day on 7. But something felt different this time. Something in the way the princess had looked at, with no fear, only defiance. Something in the way she had spoken, promising fire and ash even as she bled on the ground. She was going to die tomorrow. Jake knew that. They would make a show of it, beating her until there was nothing left. They would record it and send it to her mother as proof of their power, their cruelty, their complete lack of fear. And there was nothing he could do about it. He turned away from the crack in the wall and lay down on his thin mattress. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside his chest, something else was beginning to stir. Something that felt almost like hope, or maybe like rage, or maybe like the first spark of a fire that would soon burn out of control. Tomorrow would change everything. Jake did not know it yet, but his life was about to take a turn that would echo across the stars. The morning came too soon. The storm had passed during the night, leaving the air thick and heavy with moisture. The prisoners were woken early before the first light and marched to the punishment square in the center of the compound. No one spoke. Everyone knew what was coming. Jake stood in the middle of the crowd, surrounded by humans and aliens of a dozen different species. Some of them were friends, people he had helped over the years. Others were strangers, but they all wore the same expression on their faces. Fear mixed with something darker, resignation. They had seen this before. They would see it again. There was nothing any of them could do. The punishment square was a flat area of packed dirt, surrounded on all sides by tall metal posts. In the center stood a single wooden beam, worn smooth by years of use. Chains hung from the top of the beam, waiting for whoever would be bound to it today. The guards formed a ring around the square, their weapons ready, their yellow eyes watching the crowd for any sign of trouble. On a raised platform at one end of the square sat Commander, his massive body lounging in a chair that looked too small for him. He was smiling. He always smiled on punishment days. Then they brought out the princess. She walked between two guards, her hands bound in front of her with metal chains. She had been given no medical treatment during the night. Jake could see the wounds on her body, the places where her silver blood had dried in dark streaks on her glowing skin. She moved slowly, painfully, but she moved on her own feet. She did not let the guards drag her. When she reached the center of the square, she stopped and looked around at the crowd. Her eyes, bright as stars, moved from face to face. She was not looking for help. She knew none would come. She was simply seeing, witnessing, remembering. Her eyes found Jake for a moment, and something passed between them. He did not know what it was. Recognition, maybe. Or perhaps she saw something in him that others did not see. Then her gaze moved on, and the moment was gone. "Bring her forward," commanded. The guards pushed her toward the wooden beam. She stumbled but did not fall. When she reached the beam, they raised her arms and locked the chains around her wrists, holding her in place. She faced the crowd now, her chin raised, her back straight despite the pain that must have been running through her body. Stood from his chair and walked slowly down from the platform. He carried something in his hand, a long whip made of some kind of shining metal. Jake recognized it. A neural whip. It did not just cut the skin. It sent waves of fire through the nervous system, causing pain beyond anything the body was meant to feel. "Today we have a special guest," announced, his voice echoing across the square. "Princess of the Sovereignty has chosen to visit our humble world, and we must show her proper hospitality." Some of the guards laughed. The prisoners stayed silent. Walked in a slow circle around the princess, letting the whip trail on the ground behind him. They believe they are better than everyone else. They believe their power makes them untouchable. They look down on the rest of us like we are insects beneath their feet. He stopped in front of and leaned close to her face. "But here on my world, there is only one power that matters, and that power belongs to me." The princess met his eyes without flinching. "You are nothing," she said quietly. "A small creature playing at being important. My mother has crushed 1,000 like you." Smile did not waver, but something changed in his eyes. Something cold and ugly. "We will see," he said, "how much of that pride remains when I am finished with you." He stepped back and raised the whip. Jake watched, his heart pounding in his chest. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides. He could feel the tension in the crowd around him, the helpless anger that filled the air like smoke. Everyone knew this was wrong. No one could stop it. The princess closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. She was preparing herself for the pain. Pulled back his arm. And Jake moved. He did not think about what he was doing. He did not plan it. He did not weigh the costs and benefits or consider the consequences. He simply moved, pushing through the crowd, shoving past the startled prisoners until he was standing in the open space between the crowd and the punishment beam. "Stop," he said. His voice was not loud, but it carried across the suddenly silent square. Every eye turned to him. The guards raised their weapons, froze with the whip still held above his head. "What is this?" the commander asked, his voice low and dangerous. Jake stepped forward. His legs felt weak. His whole body was shaking. But he kept moving, kept walking until he stood just a few feet from the wooden beam. "I said stop," he repeated. "You do not have to do this." Lowered the whip slowly. He looked at Jake with something close to curiosity. A human, stepping forward to defend a princess. This is unexpected. "Let her go," Jake said. "She is injured. She needs medical attention, not torture." The commander laughed. "Medical attention. She is a prisoner. She is property of the Dominion. What happens to her is my decision and mine alone." "Then take me instead." The words came out before Jake could stop them. But once they were spoken, he did not take them back. He stood there, waiting, his eyes locked on his yellow gaze. The silence stretched on for a long moment. then began to laugh again, louder this time. "You want to take her place. You want to suffer instead of her." He shook his head in disbelief. "Humans truly are the strangest creatures. What is she to you? You do not even know her." "She is innocent," Jake said. "She crashed here by accident. She did not come to fight you or threaten you. There is no honor in beating an injured prisoner." "Honor?" repeated the word like it was a joke. "There is no honor in the minds, human. There is only power, and I have all of it." "Then prove it," Jake said. "Prove your power by breaking someone who can fight back. She can barely stand. I can take whatever you give me." He was bluffing, he knew it, probably knew it too, but something in the commander's eyes changed. Interest, curiosity, maybe even a little respect, though respect from was a dangerous thing. "You think you can survive a punishment meant for an?" asked. "Their bodies are stronger than yours. What would leave her bloody and broken would kill you." "Then let it kill me," Jake said. "At least it will be a better show than watching you beat someone who cannot fight back." Stared at him for a long moment. Behind the commander, still chained to the beam, the princess was watching Jake with wide eyes. She did not understand. No one in the crowd understood. Even Jake did not fully understand what he was doing or why. But he knew it was right. Deep in his gut, in the part of him that had made him become a medic, that had made him spend his life trying to save others, he knew this was the right thing to do. Finally smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Very well, human, I accept your offer." He turned to the guards. "Release the princess. Chain this one in her place." The guards moved quickly. They unlocked the chains from his wrists and caught her as she slumped forward. Then they grabbed Jake by the arms and dragged him to the beam. They raised his hands above his head and locked the chains around his wrists. The metal was cold and rough against his skin. Jake looked out at the crowd. He saw the faces of his fellow prisoners, shocked and confused and afraid. He saw the guards, their weapons still raised, waiting for some trick that was not coming. And he saw, standing behind him now, the neural whip held ready in his clawed hand. "You have made a noble choice, human," the commander said quietly, his voice close to Jake's ear. "A stupid choice, but noble. I will remember you for this." "Just get it over with," Jake said through clenched teeth. Stepped back. "As you wish," he said. The whip came down. The princess watched from the edge of the crowd, held upright by two guards who seemed to have forgotten their duty. Her starlight eyes never left the human who hung from the beam, who had chosen to suffer in her place. She did not understand, but she would never forget. The first strike of the neural whip sent a wave of fire through Jake's entire body. Every nerve screamed at once. His muscles locked up, his back arched, and for a moment he could not breathe, could not think, could not do anything except exist in a world of pure pain. Then the moment passed, and he was hanging from the chains, gasping for air. Blood ran down his back where the whip had cut through his shirt and into the flesh beneath. The wound burned like someone had pressed a hot iron against his skin, but that was just the beginning. The neural whip did more than cut. It sent signals of pain directly into the nervous system, making the body feel things that were not really there. Jake felt like his entire back was on fire, like his bones were breaking, like 1,000 needles were being pushed slowly into his spine. He did not scream. He wanted to. Every part of him wanted to open his mouth and let the pain pour out in a single, endless cry. But he bit down hard, clenching his jaw until he felt his teeth crack under the pressure. He would not give the satisfaction. He would not let the see him break. The second strike came before he was ready for it. It hit lower on his back, crossing over the first wound. Jake's body jerked against the chains, and a low groan escaped his lips before he could stop it. The crowd of prisoners watched in terrible silence. Some of them had covered their eyes. Others were crying. A few had fallen to their knees, unable to watch but unable to look away. Princess stood near the front of the crowd, still held by the two guards. She had not moved since they chained Jake in her place. Her face was pale, her starlight eyes wide with something that might have been shock or horror or both. She had lived for centuries. She had seen wars and disasters and the death of whole worlds, but she had never seen anything like this. A human, short-lived and fragile, choosing to suffer for someone he did not know. The third strike came, the fourth, the fifth. Jake lost count somewhere around the 10th. The world had become a blur of pain and blood and the harsh sound of laughter. His wrists were raw from pulling against the chains. His back was a ruin of torn flesh and exposed muscle. He could feel the warm wetness of blood running down his legs and pooling on the ground beneath his feet. But still he did not scream. He focused on breathing, in through the nose, out through the mouth. It was a technique he had learned years ago during his training as a combat medic. When you were treating wounded soldiers under fire, you had to stay calm. You had to control your fear and your pain and your desperate urge to run away. You had to breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The whip came down again and Jake felt something in his back give way. A rib maybe, or maybe something worse. He coughed and blood came up, spattering the dusty ground in front of him. Paused. He walked around to the front of the beam and looked at Jake's face. The human's eyes were still open, still aware, still defiant despite the damage that had been done to his body. Impressive, the commander said. Most species would be unconscious by now, or dead. Jake lifted his head with effort. It felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. Is that all you have? He asked. His voice was rough, barely more than a whisper, but the words were clear. His eyes narrowed. For a moment, something like respect flickered across his reptilian face. Then it was gone, replaced by cold anger. No, he said, that is not all. He raised the whip again. The beating continued. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Jake could not tell anymore. Time had lost all meaning. There was only the pain, endless and overwhelming, and the small flame of defiance that he kept burning in the center of his chest. He thought about his sister. She had died 10 years ago, killed in a raid on the colony where she lived. She had been 23 years old with her whole life ahead of her. Jake had not been there to protect her. He had been on a ship halfway across the galaxy when he got the news. He had joined the military the next day. He had spent the following decade fighting in every conflict he could find, trying to make up for the failure he felt every time he thought of her face. And then the had captured him, and he had ended up here in the mines, waiting to die. But he was not dying as a victim. He was dying as a choice. He had chosen to stand up when no one else would. He had chosen to protect an innocent person, even though she was not human, even though he did not know her, even though it would cost him everything. His sister would have been proud. The whip came down one final time, and Jake's legs gave out beneath him. He hung from the chains, barely conscious, his body a broken shell of what it had once been. Blood dripped steadily onto the ground, forming a dark pool that spread outward like a shadow. Stood back, breathing heavily. Even he seemed tired from the effort of the beating. He looked at the ruined human hanging from the beam and shook his head. Enough, he said, he is done. The crowd was silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The only sound was Jake's ragged breathing, each inhale a wet, painful struggle. Pulled free from the guards who held her. They were too shocked to stop her. She walked forward, her steps unsteady, until she stood in front of Jake. Her silver blood still stained her clothes, but she did not seem to notice. All her attention was focused on the human who had saved her. Why, she asked quietly, her voice was thick with emotion. Why did you do this? Jake opened his eyes. They were clouded with pain, but there was still light in them, still life. Because someone had to, he said. Reached out and touched his face gently. Her fingers were cool against his burning skin. I will not forget this, she said. I swear to you on my mother's throne I will not forget what you have done. Grabbed her shoulder and pulled her away roughly. Touching, he sneered. But your promises mean nothing here, princess. He will be dead by morning. He turned to his guards. "Throw him in the pit. Let him die with the other garbage." The guards moved forward. They unlocked the chains and caught Jake's body as it fell. Then they dragged him away, leaving a trail of blood on the dusty ground. Watched him go. Her hands were shaking. Her eyes were bright with tears that she refused to let fall. "I will remember," she said again, so quietly that only she could hear. "And my mother will remember, and when we come for you, there will be no mercy." She turned and looked at the commander, and for just a moment he saw something in her starlight eyes that made him feel cold inside. Something ancient and powerful and absolutely terrifying. Then the guards led her back to her cell, and the punishment square emptied, and Jake was thrown into a dark pit at the edge of the compound to wait for death. But death did not come as quickly as it hoped. In the darkness of the pit, surrounded by refuse and waste, and the bones of those who had died before him, Jake held on to life with every ounce of strength he had left. He did not know why, but he refused to let go. 3 days passed in the pit. Jake drifted in and out of consciousness, never fully awake, never fully asleep. His wounds had become infected. Fever burned through his body, making him see things that were not there. Sometimes he thought he was back on Earth, lying in a field of grass, looking up at blue sky. Sometimes he thought his sister was sitting beside him, holding his hand, telling him that everything would be okay. But then the visions would fade, and he would be back in the darkness, surrounded by the smell of rot and the cold touch of death creeping closer with every passing hour. He should have died. Any doctor would have said so. His injuries were too severe. The infection was too advanced. His body had lost too much blood. There was no medical reason for him to still be breathing. But Jake had never been good at doing what he was supposed to do. On the morning of the 3rd day, the sky above 7 caught fire. The first sign was a low rumbling sound that shook the ground. The prisoners in the barracks looked up in confusion. The guards raised their weapons, searching for the source of the noise. And then, one by one, they saw it. Ships, hundreds of ships, emerging from the clouds like gods descending from heaven. The war fleet had arrived. The ships were beautiful in a way that human vessels never were. They gleamed with a soft white light, their hulls covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change as they moved. The largest ship, the one in the center of the formation, was nearly a mile long. It hung in the sky like a second sun, its weapons already powered and ready. On the bridge of that ship stood Queen of the Sovereignty. She was tall, even by standards, with skin that glowed like moonlight and eyes that burned with cold fire. She wore armor made of a metal that did not exist on any world in the known galaxy, and in her hand she carried a staff that hummed with barely contained power. She had ruled the people for 8,000 years. She had seen empires rise and fall. She had fought wars that had reshaped the stars themselves. And now she had come for her daughter. "Open a channel," she commanded. Her voice was soft, but it carried an authority that made even her own soldiers stand. A screen flickered to life in front of her, showing the face of Commander. He looked smaller on the screen, his yellow eyes wide with barely hidden fear. "Queen," he said, trying to sound confident, "this is an unexpected honor. To what do we owe this visit?" "You have my daughter," the Queen said. It was not a question. His face twitched. "The princess came to our world of her own free will. She crashed her ship in a storm. We have been caring for her injuries and waiting for—" "Enough!" The single word cut through his lies like a blade. "I have been tracking my daughter's journey since she left I know exactly where she is and what has happened to her. You have one chance, Commander. Release her now, and I will allow you to live." Sphere turned to anger. "You threaten me. On my own world, I have weapons, I have defenses. Your fleet may be powerful, but—" "You have nothing," the Queen interrupted. "Your weapons are toys, your defenses are paper, and your life is already forfeit for what you have done." She leaned forward and even through the screen felt the weight of her gaze pressing down on him. "But I am not a cruel ruler. I do not wish for unnecessary death. Release my daughter, surrender yourself to my justice, and I will spare your soldiers and your prisoners. Refuse, and I will burn everything on this world to ash. You have 1 minute to decide. The screen went dark. Stood in his command center, his hands shaking. He looked at his officers, saw the fear in their eyes. They knew, as he knew, that the Queen was not bluffing. She had destroyed whole star systems before. She would not hesitate to destroy one small mining world. But surrender meant death. The Queen would not spare him, no matter what she said. And if he was going to die, he would rather die fighting than on his knees. Power up the weapons, he ordered, all of them. The battle lasted less than 20 minutes. They opened fire first, launching missiles and energy beams at the fleet. The attacks splashed harmlessly against glowing shields that absorbed the impacts like water absorbing drops of rain. Then, they responded. Their weapons made no sound. There was no dramatic explosion, no thundering boom. The defense station simply ceased to exist, replaced by expanding clouds of glowing dust. One by one, the gun emplacements, the shield generators, the communication towers, all vanished under the silent, efficient assault of the fleet. Ran from his command center as the building collapsed around him. He made it 10 steps before a soldier appeared in front of him, materializing out of thin air. The soldier wore white armor and carried a rifle that hummed with power. "Commander," the soldier said calmly, "you are under arrest by order of Queen. Please come with me." Reached for his sidearm. He never got the chance to draw it. Across the compound, the prisoners were being freed. Soldiers moved through the barracks, breaking chains and opening doors. Humans and aliens who had spent years in slavery walked out into the light, blinking in confusion and hope. Princess emerged from her cell, supported by 2 guards. She was still weak from her injuries, but her eyes were clear and sharp. She grabbed the arm of the nearest soldier. "There is a human," she said urgently. "A man named Jake. They threw him into a pit near the edge of the compound. He saved my life. You have to find him." The soldier nodded and spoke into a communicator on his wrist. Within minutes, a team was dispatched to search. They found Jake at the bottom of the pit, lying in a pool of his own blood. He was barely breathing. His pulse was weak and irregular. The medics who reached him first did not think he would survive. But they tried anyway. They used technology that humans had never seen, machines that could rebuild damaged tissue at the cellular level, drugs that could fight any infection, devices that could restart a failing heart with a single pulse of energy. They worked on Jake for hours, fighting death every step of the way. And slowly, impossibly, Jake began to heal. When Queen descended to the surface of 7, she found her daughter waiting for her. Ran to her mother and threw her arms around her, holding on tight as tears finally fell from her starlight eyes. "I thought you would not come," whispered. "I will always come for you," the Queen replied, stroking her daughter's silver hair. "Always." They held each other for a long moment, then pulled back and looked up at her mother's face. "There is someone you need to meet," she said. "A human. He did something that I still do not understand. He chose to suffer in my place. He took a beating that should have killed him just to protect me, and I do not know why." The Queen's expression did not change, but something shifted in her ancient eyes. Interest, curiosity, maybe something more. "Take me to him," she said. They found Jake in the medical tent, lying on a bed made of light and energy. The healers had done their work well. His wounds were closed. His bones were mended. His blood had been replenished. He looked peaceful now, almost like he was simply sleeping. The Queen stood at the foot of his bed and watched him for a long time. "He is remarkable," she said finally. "His body should have failed days ago, but something kept him alive. Some will, some fire inside him refused to let go." "He said it was the right thing to do," said softly. "When I asked him why he did it, that was all he said, because someone had to." The Queen was silent for another moment. Then she turned to her daughter. "This human has earned a debt that cannot easily be repaid," she said. "When he wakes, bring him to me. I wish to speak with him myself." She swept out of the tent, her guards falling into step behind her. She sat down in a chair beside Jake's bed and took his hand in hers. His skin was warm now, not cold like it had been in the pit. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths. "Thank you," she whispered. "I do not know if you can hear me, but thank you." Outside the tent, the sun was setting on 7 for the last time. Tomorrow, the prisoners would be taken to new worlds, given new lives, given freedom. The mining operation would be shut down. The Dominion would be forced to pay for their crimes. But for now, there was just the quiet of the evening, the soft glow of the medical equipment, and a princess sitting beside the human who had changed her life forever. Jake woke slowly, like rising from deep water toward distant light. The first thing he noticed was that he was not in pain. For 3 years, pain had been his constant companion, the ache in his muscles from the mines, the hunger in his belly from bad food, the deep, burning agony of the beating that should have killed him. But now there was nothing, just a strange, floating comfort that he did not recognize. The second thing he noticed was the bed. It was soft in a way that human beds never were, like lying on a cloud made of warm light. He could feel it supporting every part of his body, adjusting to his movements, cradling him like he was something precious. The third thing he noticed was that he was not alone. He opened his eyes. The room around him was made of light. The walls glowed with a soft white radiance. The ceiling curved high overhead, decorated with patterns that seemed to shift and flow like living things. Through a large window, he could see stars, more stars than he had ever seen before, spread across the darkness of space like diamonds scattered on black velvet. He was on a ship. "You are awake." The voice came from beside him. Jake turned his head and saw Princess sitting in a chair next to his bed. She looked different than she had in the prison. Her wounds were healed. Her silver hair was clean and shining. She wore a simple white dress that made her glowing skin seem even brighter, but her eyes were the same, deep and ancient, like looking into pools of starlight. "How long?" Jake asked. His voice came out rough, like he had not used it in a long time. 5 days, said. "The healers kept you asleep while they worked on your injuries. You were very badly hurt." Jake looked down at his hands. They were clean, the skin smooth and unmarked. He remembered them being covered in blood, torn and bruised from pulling against the chains. Now they looked new, like the hands of someone who had never worked a day in his life. "They rebuilt you," continued. "New skin, new muscle, new bone where the old was damaged beyond repair. They even regrew some of your organs. The healers are very good at what they do." Jake lifted his hand to his back, feeling for the scars that should have been there. He found nothing but smooth skin. "I asked them to leave one," he said quietly. "One scar so I would remember." Nodded, "They told me. It is on your left shoulder, a thin line where the first strike of the whip landed." Jake closed his eyes for a moment. He could almost feel it now, that single mark on his body, a reminder of the choice he had made. "My mother wishes to see you," said. "When you are strong enough to walk, she has requested your presence in the throne room." Jake opened his eyes. "The Queen, she wants to see me." "You saved her daughter's life," said simply. "That is not something she takes lightly." Jake sat up slowly, testing his body. Everything seemed to work. His muscles felt strong, stronger than they had been in years. Whatever the healers had done, they had not just fixed him. They had made him better. "I can walk now," he said. Smiled. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and it transformed her face into something even more beautiful than before. "Then follow me," she said. The walk to the throne room took several minutes. The ship was enormous, larger than any vessel Jake had ever been on. They passed through corridors of glowing crystal, past gardens filled with plants that seemed to sing softly as they walked by, past windows that showed views of nebulae and distant galaxies that human eyes had never seen. Finally, they reached a set of massive doors made of some silvery metal. The doors swung open without being touched, and Jake stepped into the presence of a queen. The throne room was vast, a cathedral of light and space. The ceiling rose so high overhead that it disappeared into soft whiteness. The floor was polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the figures who stood upon it. And at the far end of the room, sitting on a throne that seemed to be carved from a single enormous crystal, was Queen. She was taller than her daughter, and her presence filled the room like a physical force. Her skin glowed brighter than any Jake had seen. Her eyes burned with ancient power. She wore robes of deep purple and silver, and on her head sat a crown of living light that shifted and sparkled with every movement. Jake walked toward her, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Behind him, followed at a respectful distance. When he reached the base of the throne, he stopped, unsure of what to do. He had never met a queen before. He did not know the proper way to bow or speak or act. So he simply stood there and waited. Queen studied him for a long moment. Her eyes moved over his face, his body, his posture. She seemed to be looking at something deeper than his physical form, something inside him that he was not aware of himself. "You are Jake," she said at last. Her voice was soft, but it filled the room effortlessly. "Yes," Jake replied. "My daughter has told me what you did for her. She has told me every detail." The queen rose from her throne and descended the steps until she stood directly in front of Jake. She was almost a foot taller than him, and he had to tilt his head back to meet her eyes. In 10,000 years, no being has ever sacrificed themselves for an royal. We are considered too powerful, too dangerous for such gestures. Other species fear us or worship us or hate us, but they do not protect us. They do not suffer for us. Yet you, a human, chose to take a punishment meant for my daughter. You chose pain and death for a princess you had never met. Jake did not know what to say. He had not done it for praise or reward. He had simply done what felt right. "May I ask why?" the queen continued. Jake thought for a moment before answering. "Because it was the right thing to do," he said. "She was hurt and alone, and no one else was going to help her. I could not just stand by and watch her suffer. It did not matter that she was or that I was human. She needed help. I could give it, so I did." The queen was silent for a long time. Her ancient eyes searched his face, looking for deception, for hidden motives, for anything that might explain his actions in terms she understood. She found nothing but simple, honest truth. "Your species is young," she said finally. "You live such short lives, barely a heartbeat compared to our own. Most of the galaxy considers you primitive, barely worth notice. But I have watched your kind since you first reached the stars. I have seen your wars and your cruelty, but I have also seen your courage and your kindness. You are capable of great darkness, but also of great light." She reached out and placed her hand on Jake's forehead. Warmth flooded through him, spreading from the point of contact through his entire body. It felt like sunlight and safety and belonging, all wrapped together in a single, endless moment. "Among my people there is an ancient law," the queen continued. "When a life debt is owed to one who has no standing among us, the crown may elevate that individual, grant them status, protection, purpose." She removed her hand, and Jake felt strangely empty without her touch. "I claim you, Jake, not as property, not as servant. I claim you as a ward of the throne, bound to our house by honor and by choice. You will be given a place among us. You will be healed, trained, and protected. And when they come seeking vengeance, and they will, you will stand with us against them." Jake looked past the queen to where stood watching, her starlight eyes bright with emotion. "And if I refuse?" he asked, not because he wanted to, but because he needed to know that he had a choice. The queen smiled. It was the first time he had seen her smile, and it made her seem almost human for a moment. "Then you may return to Earth with our gratitude and a fortune in gold. But I do not think you will refuse, Jake. I see the fire in you. The same fire that made you step forward when no one else would. You were wasted in those minds. You were wasted on a galaxy that does not yet understand what humanity truly is. Jake thought of Earth, so far away. He thought of the wars he had fought, the years of his life spent surviving rather than living. He thought of his sister, who had died because he was not there to protect her. Then he thought of standing in that dusty square, making a choice that mattered for the first time in his life. "I accept," he said. And somewhere across the galaxy, in the dark halls of the Dominion, word began to spread. A human had earned the favor of the Queen. A human had shown courage that put their own warriors to shame. A human had proven that the short-lived creatures of Earth were capable of something the galaxy had forgotten. Honor without expectation. Courage without calculation. Humanity at its finest. The stars were watching now, and nothing would ever be the same.